Hello everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome to my first video under the new channel name of Extras Ideas. These kind of videos are going to be basically me unedited talking about my ideas. I like to write down stuff. I have all sorts of ideas. The first idea I'm going to be talking about is calendars, my new calendar system that I came up with back in 2020. And I refined it this year in 2023. So, what is the calendar system? Let's get right into it. Uh, Extras updated 2023 calendar reusing and counting system. So, the basics. We got to make sure we're all on the same page before we even get into this, right? A calendar is a chart or series of pages showing the dates, weeks, and months of a particular year or giving particular seasonal information, according to the dictionary. Sure, that's fine. That's the dictionary. We're all on the same page, right? But for the purposes of this system, a calendar will simply refer to just how the days of the week correspond to the date. The system cannot be used for lunar or extraterrestrial tracking. Just so, what does that mean? It means that we're only going to be looking at, like, if Thursday is April 1st, which it was in 2010, and 2021. If Thursday is April 1st, then in respect to that, how many calendars have it such that Thursday is April 1st, that kind of thing, right? So, these are the universal truths of the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar that we all use. So, most years are 365 days long, except with the exception of the leap year. Obviously, leap years are 366 days long. A leap year happens roughly every 4 years, but not always. A leap year does not happen if the year is divisible by 100, but not 400. If it is divisible by 400, then it is a leap year, despite also being divisible by 100. So, for example, the year 1900 and the year 2100, those are not leap years, despite being divisible by 4. The year 2000 and the year 2400 will end up being leap years, because even though they are divisible by 4, even though they are not, or even though they are divisible by 100, since they're also divisible by 400, they do not count. Or they do count, sorry. Okay, the only distinguishing factors between any given calendar for any year is what day of the week January 1st lands on, and whether or not it's a leap year. Any two calendars that share these exact same properties are the exact same calendar. If you have a calendar where January 1st is on a Sunday and it's a leap year, and you have another year that has the exact same properties, January 1st is on a Sunday and it's a leap year, then those are the exact same calendars. Everything else will line up one for one. You can look and be like, oh, November 21st is on a Tuesday. I don't know if that's true. I'm making this up, but I'm just telling you the idea, the general idea, right? So, and that would apply for both years. So, the previous statement means that there are only 14 distinct and unique possible calendar configurations. This should be obvious because you have the 7 days of the week, Monday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then, so those are 7, and then whether or not it's a leap year, you multiply that by 2. So a majority of the time, the day of the week for January 1st will simply shift by 1 day. For example, in 2001, January 1st lands on a Monday. And for 2002, January 1st is on a Tuesday. As you can see, Monday, Tuesday, it shifts by 1 day of the week. This does not always apply thanks to leap years shifting the day of the week twice. So, example, 2004, January 1st lands on a Thursday, but by 2005, you skip Friday and it lands on a Saturday. January 1st lands on a Saturday in 2005. And that's not even mentioning years that are divisible by 100 and not 400. We'll talk about that later, but I just want you to understand that, right? Now that you understand these universal truths, I can show you an intricate system that allows you to determine what calendar belongs to which year without ever needing to look it up. That's right, every calendar for every year after 1 AD/CE in the Gregorian calendar system is right here in this document, and I came up with this system entirely by myself back in 2020 and updated it in 2023. Just by looking at calendars, doing math, and seeing if I was right, and constant trial and error. Like, literally, I would be like, oh man, what day of the week is 2016 on? And then I would look and it'd be like, okay. And then I would look at all of the calendars until I got to a point where I found, like, I would literally just go through and I'm like, okay, when is the next time that, this calendar for 2016, when is the next time that happens? And I would look and then, I would do the math. And then I'd be, okay, what about 2019, 2020? And I would do that for a bunch of different years until I found a trend. And with that trend, I was able to make this document. So all of the terms, names, and arbitrary dates are simply created by me for the purposes of organizing and understanding what years correspond to what calendars. Also, everything to clarify, just to clarify, everything I say in this document in terms of ranges is inclusive. So if I say between 1889 and 1899, that is including both 1889 and 1899. It's not exclusive, it's not like one-way exclusive, it is including both years. If I'm saying between 2001 and 2004, that is including 2001 and 2004. Okay? Yeah, cool. Got it. So now we can move on to new terms. So this is the first term I came up with. This is a Demos proto-year. Now, this is the very first term I came up with because everything we do is based off of the idea of the Demos proto-year. I'll explain why it's important in a second. But this is the first thing you need to understand, is that a Demos proto-year is any year that is divisible by 400. So 1600, 2000, 2800, also 2400, the year 1200, the year 3200. If that year is divisible by 400, it is a Demos proto-year. So now we have a century set. A century set is a set of a set of 400 years that last between 99 years before a Demos proto-year and 300 years after a Demos proto-year. Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. I had to think about it. That is correct. So the century sets are divided. So that is the century set, right? So the current century set we have 1901 through the year 2300. So that means that the next century set will be the year 2301 up until 2007. 2301 to 2700. Yeah, had to think about that, but yes, because that's 100 years before. Or, yeah, that's 100 years before that. Okay, yeah, okay, cool. So, and then once you get to the year 2701, then you're on the next century set. That would be the 6th century set. We're currently in the 5th century set. So the century sets are divided into 3 century groups with 3 outliers. So we have the Demos century group, which are the years between 99 years before and 99 years after a Demos proto-year. For the current century set, that would be from 1901 to 2099. So what that means is that like anything that is like 99 years before and 99 years after, that is part of that century group. So and like and it's 99 is before the Demos proto-year. So for example, the year 2301 would be the very first year of the 6th century set. Yeah, makes sense? Got it. Okay. So that is the Demos century group. Now we have the Phobos century groups. There's 2 of them. We have the primary Phobos century group and the secondary Phobos century group. The primary Phobos century group is between 101 and 199 years after a Demos proto-year. For the current century set, that would be from 2101 to 2199. And then the secondary is between 201 and 299 years after a Demos proto-year. For this current century set, that would be years between 2201 and 2299. Okay? So I came up with all these like definitions. They seem a bit arbitrary, but trust me, they will make sense later on. So now we have the century group spacers, which are not part of the century groups really. They're spacers. So the years between the century group spacers the years between century groups and century sets don't follow the established rules of either century groups or alpha year cycles, which we'll explain what alpha year cycles are later, and they have their own exceptions. These years are also defined as years that are divisible by 100 but not 400. So remember those years I mentioned before, 1900, 2100, 2300, 2200. Those are all century group spacers, and the reason why they are century group spacers is because they are, like I said, they're divisible by 400, but not 100, and they mess up the cycle, the alpha year cycle, and yeah, cause a lot of different weird issues. So hopefully everyone's on the same page with that. Now we can move on to the proto years. I call them Mars Moon proto years because it's either a Deimos or Phobos proto year. So Deimos proto year, I explained what that is earlier. It's any year that is divisible by 400, but not sorry, any year that is divisible by 400. End of story, right? So 2400, 2000, 1600, those are all Deimos proto years. So Phobos proto year is either a primary or secondary Phobos proto year, because there's two of them. And by the way, there's one Deimos proto year, one primary Phobos proto year, and one secondary Phobos proto year per century set. So a primary Phobos proto year is any year that is 152 years ahead of or 248 years before a Deimos proto year. So those examples would be 7252, 2152, 2552. They're always going to end with 52, and they're always going to be 100 years after 152 years after a Deimos proto year. Yep. Okay. Then secondary Phobos proto year is the exact opposite. It is 240 years ahead of or 152 years before a Deimos year. So 1848, 2248, 1648. That would be in the current. 2248 would be the century. Sorry, that would be the secondary Phobos proto year for this century set. So now we can talk about alpha years. What is an alpha year? Well, an alpha year is any year. Well, there's three different types of alpha years, and they depend on. Well, technically only two, but I'll explain that, right? Any year that is 0, 28, 56, or 84 years away from a Deimos proto year is a Deimos alpha year. So there's a Deimos alpha year and a Phobos alpha year. The Deimos proto year, the Deimos alpha year is either 0, 28, 56, or 84 years away. So there's going to be 7 per century set. So every century set, there's going to be 7 Deimos alpha years. So, for this century set, that would be 1916, 1944, 1972, 2000, 2028, 2056, and 2084. Those are all Deimos alpha years. And you can add or subtract 400, by the way, right? So the year 2400 is also going to be a Deimos alpha year. The year 2428, the year 2456, the year 2884, this is just for the current century set. So now we have the Phobos alpha year, either a primary or secondary Phobos alpha year. So primary Phobos alpha year is 0 or 28 years away from a primary Phobos proto year in either direction. So unlike the Deimos alpha year, where it could be 0, 28, 56, or 84, for the primary Phobos alpha year, Phobos, it's only 0 or 28 years away. So there's only going to be 3 per century set. And in the current century set, there's only those are going to occur at 2124, 2152, and 2180. And again, you can add 400 and subtract 400, or multitudes of 400. So it could, the 2524 would also be a valid primary Phobos alpha year, same as 2552, which is, I believe, when Halo 3 takes place. Somebody verify that. I could verify that, but I'm not going to. And obviously, 2980, right? 2980 would also be a primary Phobos alpha year. I think you get the idea about the century set stuff, that you can add or subtract multitudes of 400, and they are going to all be the same thing. But yeah. Then we have the secondary Phobos alpha year, which is basically the same thing. It's going to be 0 or 28 years away, so in either direction, from the secondary Phobos proto year. So it's basically the same thing, except for it being part of the primary Phobos proto year. It's part of the secondary Phobos proto year. So in the century set, there's going to be 3, just like the primary Phobos alpha year. And those years would be 2220, 2248, and 2276. Those are all the secondary Phobos alpha years of this century set. So now we can talk about the alpha year cycle. I've done all of this explanation stuff, and to be fair, this explanation stuff is important. Okay, you got to understand what an alpha year is before we can start talking about how to reuse calendars. So every 28 years from an alpha year, a continuous cycle of calendars repeat themselves, with the exception of changes to the century group. That is why the century groups are different, by the way, is because once you go to a century group spacer, then that messes up the alpha year cycle. And I'll explain exactly how in a second. So, for example, the year 2001 is 1 year after an alpha year, and thus shares the exact same calendar as all other years that are 1 year after an alpha year. So the year 1973, the year 2029, the year 2153, they are all 1 year after an alpha year, and thus, or 20, you could say 1 year after an alpha year or 27 years away from an alpha year, and thus they all have the exact same calendar. And not only do they have the exact same calendar, they have the exact same placement in the alpha year cycle. So you could predict what the next year will be based off of the cycle, unless if it's a century group spacer. So, and as I said right there, however, as alluded to before, the cycle breaks every time we approach a century group spacer. So this is an important distinction. The jump from one century group to another is a very specific event within the alpha year cycle. For specifically the century group spacer, and it only applies to the century group spacer itself, the cycle will jump back 6 years. So, for example, if you're at the year 1900, then that's going to have the same calendar as the year 1894, because that is 6 years. So you're jumping back specifically 6 years for that specific number in the alpha year cycle. But the next year, the cycle will jump back another 6 years. And I have the example right here we'll talk about. So 2099 uses the same calendar as any year 13 years away from an alpha year. Assuming that 2100 was actually going to be a leap year, then in 13 years we would have had an alpha year. But because it isn't, this is where we have this little thing coming on here. The year 2100 uses the same calendar as any year 12 plus 6 or 18 years away from an alpha year. So basically, you're jumping back in the cycle 6 years. Does that make sense, right? So we're at 13. We get to the century group spacer, so we add another 6 because we're jumping back in the cycle. Okay, so 18 years away now. And then the next year, 2101, you're going to jump back another further 6 years. So it's going to be using any calendar that's 17. It's 17 because, again, this is the next year, right? Last year was 18 years away. This year it would have been 17 years away, but you're adding another 6 years. So now 2101 is 23 years away from an alpha year. Okay? So you have the year before it, right? Whatever it is. It could be 6 years away, 13 years away, whatever. Technically, there's only 3 options, but whatever. We're going to say it's 13 years away for this, right? Next year, you're adding 6. So instead of it being 12, it's 18. Next year, you're adding 6 again. So for 2101, you're adding another 6. It's going to be 23 years away from an alpha year. And that is how long you'll actually be until there's an alpha year. So here's a table showing the distance to and from an alpha year represented by D, whether or not it's a leap year represented by L, and the day of the week for January 1st represented by W. As mentioned at the beginning, any 2 years that start on the same day of the week and share the same leap year property, both yes or both no, will have the same calendar. So here we are, alpha year, yes, Saturday. So for example, the year 2000, that is an alpha year because it is the proto year for the Deimos proto year. So it is obviously an alpha year because Deimos proto year is an alpha year by definition. And that was yes, Saturday. So the year 2000, yes, Saturday. And that's also going to apply to the year 2028 as well. That's also going to be a leap year, and the day of the week for January 1st is going to be on a Saturday. The next year, going back to 2000, that's going to be 2001. It's going to be no Monday. So it's not going to be a leap year, and the day of the week is going to start on a Monday. And you'll see this trend, right? It's going from, it skips, obviously, we're at Saturday here. It skips Sunday because it's a leap year, and it goes to Monday. Then these next few years are not leap years, so you just go Tuesday, Wednesday, and it stays as no. Then it's yes, Thursday, all right? Yes, Thursday. But then the next year is going to skip Friday and go to Saturday, and that is, it's going to keep doing that for the cycle until we get 28 years in the future, or 27 years, and the very last day before the alpha year cycle repeats itself. So if we're going back to 2000, it would be like the year 1999 or the year 2027 for us. That is going to be no Friday. So our current year is 2023. So we're 5 years away from an alpha year, or 23 years ahead of an alpha year. And January 1st, obviously it's not a leap year, duh. And January 1st did indeed start on Sunday. Let me double check that. If I go to my calendar, boom, yep, it did. January 1st starts on a Sunday. So there you go. That really just unlocked the keys for everything right there. Technically, you already have all the information you need by this point, right? I told you what the alpha years are. I told you what I literally gave you the list of every alpha year, and I told you the distance of alpha years, and I told you how it changes, exactly how it changes once you get to the century group spacers. You add 6, and then you add 6 years, and then that's how the cycle continues. So theoretically, you have all the information you need. But of course, there's so much more we could talk about, so we're going to. Oh, and I did the same thing here, but I regrouped by repeats. So for no Sunday, the same calendars are going to be +6, +17, and +23. So 2006, 2017, and 2023 all have the same calendar. 2001, 2007, 2018, they all have the same calendar. 2002, 2013, 2019, 2009, 2015, 2026. So like, you get the idea, right? There's 3 within a 28-year cycle for non-leap years. There's going to be 3 repeats. Okay, so the year 2023, it's not a leap year. There's 2 other years within the last 28-year span. There's been 2 other years that have the exact same calendar. Yeah, cool. And then obviously, well, I guess it's not obvious, but for leap years, you're only ever going to have that 1 year. Basically, what I'm saying is that you're only going to have a yes Sunday or a yes Monday or whatever every 28 years, because there is only 1 per alpha year cycle. Like next year, 2024, which would be where is it? Right here, yes Monday. Next year, you're not going to be able to experience a calendar that is the exact same as 2024 until whatever 24 plus 28 is. What is that? Plus 2, 30, 3 plus 30 plus 22 is 52. Until 2052. Anyways, assuming I did that math right. So, this isn't necessarily related to the alpha year cycle, but I'm going to go on a tangent. This is a bonus. This is your bonus. I mean, technically, it's really a big part of it, too. For any given year, you can determine the next and most previous reusable calendar. Duh, obviously, I kind of already explained that because I told you literally that everything is on a cycle for every 28 years until you get to a century group. And on a wide scale, everything is on a cycle every 400 years. So, if that year is 1 year after a leap year, or 3 years before a leap year, the most previous reusable calendar was 11 years ago, and the next reusable calendar is 6 years ahead. So, the year 2021, let's take that as an example. The most previously reusable calendar was the year 2010. The next reusable calendar is going to be in 2027. If that year is 1 year before a leap year or 3 years after a leap year, the most previous reusable calendar was 6 years ago, and the next reusable calendar is 11 years ahead, the exact opposite. So the year 2023, for example, the most previous reusable calendar was 2017, and the next reusable calendar will be in 2034. So if you want to hold on to your calendars, so if you have a calendar for this year, right, 2023, if you have a calendar from 2017, you can use it for this year. Conversely, you can use this calendar that you're buying for this year, and you can use it in the year 2034. If that year is 2 years before or ahead of a leap year, the most previous and next reusable calendars are 11 years ago and ahead. So there is no shift of like 6 or 11. It's 11 every single time. 2022, that's 2 years ahead of a leap year. Obviously, that leap year being 2020. It's also 2 years before a leap year, that leap year being 2024. So since it's 2 years difference either way, then, and this is, keep in mind though, this is ahead of or before. So like, for example, the year 1902. The year 1900 isn't the leap year. So it's not 2 years ahead of a leap year, because 1900 wasn't a leap year. However, since 1904 is a leap year, it is 2 years before a leap year. So just to clarify that, I did both so that there wasn't any confusion. 1902 is going to have the exact same permutations as any year that is 2 years ahead or before. For the purposes of adding, subtracting, that's different, right? But for the purposes of adding, right, 1902, it's going to have the exact same calendar as 1913 because you're adding 11. And 1898, if you subtract 11, as long as you don't cross the century group spacer stuff, right? But if you subtract 11, then you'll get the year 1887, and that's going to be the same year, same calendar as 1898. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Oh yeah, and as I just said here, if that year is a leap year, the most previous and next reusable calendars are 28 years ago and ahead. So 2024, that is a leap year. The next time you'll be able to reuse that is in 2052, 28 years into the future. Because you have to wait for you have to wait a whole alpha year cycle in order to get to your next reusable calendar. But keep in mind, these rules only apply if the century group doesn't change after adding and subtracting. So obviously for the next until the year 2089, right? Yeah, until the year 2089, everything here, that'll work for you. When you get to the year 2090 though, or 2089, when you get to the year 2089 though, that's when everything's going to get all out of whack. Okay? It doesn't matter, around that time. Because, adding 11 is the maximum, right? Actually, that's not true. 2072, because 2072, if you add 28, then it would have been 2100, but you can't do that. So, actually, year 2072. You won't have to worry about that for a long time, though, realistically. That's what I'm trying to say. So, if that year is a century group spacer, and again, we're talking about around the century group spacer, time, right? If that year is a century group spacer, the most previous and next reusable calendars are 6 years ago and ahead. So the year 1900, you subtract 6 years, you get 1894, and you add 6 years and you get 1906. And I kind of alluded to this first part earlier when I was talking about the alpha year cycle, how it breaks, how you add 6 years, and that's going to be the next year, right? In the for the alpha year cycle, it's going to be another 6 years behind in the alpha year cycle. And 1900, you add 6 years, 1906 is going to be the same calendar. Okay. For years that are not a leap year or century group spacer, if that year is 3 years after a leap year and or 1 year before a leap year, the most previous reusable calendar was 12 years ago. So last time it was 11, but this time it's 12. And the next reusable calendar is still going to be 6 years ahead. So the year 1895, you're going to be adding 6. The next reusable calendar is 1901. And same with 1899, you add 6 years, because 1899 is 1 year, it's 3 years after a leap year. Like I said, it's and or, right? It could be both, or it could be one or the other. 1900 would have been a leap year, but so the 1 year before would apply, or wouldn't apply, but it does because I say and or, right? Okay, 1899, you add 6 years, next reusable calendar is in 1905. However, 1903, since normally, if you were to subtract 11 years, there wouldn't be an issue. But because you're crossing the boundary of a century group spacer, you're subtracting 12 years rather than 11 years. Got it? Okay. If that year is 1 year, wait. Also, by the way, let me look at this, right? So 3 years after, 1 year before, and then it's subtract 12, add 6. Subtract 11, add 6. So that's actually the opposite. Because this would normally you would, 2023, right? That's 1 year after. Normally you would subtract. So it's actually the opposite, but instead of it being 6 and 11, it's 6 and 12. That's interesting. I didn't actually pay attention to that ever. Wow. I looked at this whole document and made this whole document and never really actually paid attention to that. So, yeah, 1899, you add 6. Normally you would add 11, but instead you add 6. Yeah? Okay. If that year is 1 year after a leap year and or 3 years before a leap year, you do the exact opposite. You add 12 and subtract 6. So 1897, 1 year after a leap year, right? No, 3 years before a leap year. Well, same difference. Same difference. 1896 was a leap year. You add 12. 1901, 1 year after a leap year, or 3 years before a leap year. Sorry, 1900 wasn't a leap year. So subtract 6. 1905, you subtract 6. Yeah, cool. If that year is 2 years before and or after a leap year and not 6 years away from a century group spacer, you add or subtract 12 years. You add or subtract 12 years. So basically the same difference, right? And I have to specify if it's not 6 years away, because 6 years away is 2 years away from an alpha year. Or sorry, not from an alpha year, from a leap year, right? 1896, 1894, 1894 is 2 years away from an alpha year. That being 1896. 1896. 1894, 2 years away from an alpha year or leap year, 1896. However, 1894 is 6 years away from a century group spacer, and thus you don't need to do this. You just simply add 6. Just to clarify that, right? 1898, you add 12 to get to 1910. 2110, you subtract 12 to get to 2098. Normally you would be adding or subtracting 11, but you subtract another one. Isn't that weird? Isn't that funny? Ain't that cool how the cycle repeats itself? If that year is 6 years before or after a leap year, add or subtract 6 years. So 2106, you subtract 6. 2094, you add 6. You know, it's basically the reverse of the very first thing. So for leap years, that was all for like non-leap years, right? These are all right here that are not a leap year or century group spacer. For leap years, oh my goodness, it's so complicated, but unfortunately that is just how the Gregorian calendar works. First, you have to look at the current distance to the next century. Again, this only applies when changing from one century group to another, right? So this is only going to be in like 28 years before and 28 years after a century group spacer, roughly. If your years between XX89, or 11 years before the new century, and XX99, 1 year before the new century, simply add 12. So 1892, 1896, you add 12 years. You know, normally you would add 28 years. But now you're only adding 12 years. So for 1892, the next reusable calendar is going to be 1904. Very recent, very recent. Which, now that I think about it, huh? Wait a minute. No, that's fine. That's fine. I talk about that later because this is a leap year. 1904 is a leap year, so we're good. We're good. We're good. We're chilling. Okay. If your year is between I use YY just to differentiate it from XX. If your year is between YY01 and YY11, so either 1 year after the new century or 11 years after the new century, you simply subtract 12. So the exact opposite. 2304 minus 12, 2292. And you could do the same thing right here, right? 1904, subtract 12, 1892. 2108, subtract 12, 2096. Exact same deal. Again, only if it is between 1 year after and 11 years after. And this right here, 11 years before, 1 year before. However, things are different if you are between 12 and 28 years. So between XX72 and XX88, you add 40. So the year 1880, that is between 1872 and 1888, you add 40. The year 2176, same difference, you add 40. 2284, you add 40. That is when the next reusable calendar will be. If your year is between Oh, and this is the exact same thing, but the opposite. So if you're subtracting the year 2220, you subtract by 40, 2180, which is basically the same thing as this thing right here. 1920, you subtract 40, you get 1880. It's basically the same thing. Okay? You can read this 1912 minus 40, 1872, 2328 minus 40, 2288. Okay? Yeah, cool. So that's it. That is how you, dear viewer, can figure out when your next reusable calendar is for every possible year and every possible circumstance. That's it. You have all of the information. You know how the Deimos proto year works. You know how the century sets work. You know how the alpha year cycle works, and you know how to find out when your next reusable calendar is, just based off of how many years it is from a leap year, and if you're going to be crossing the borders and boundaries between an alpha year and whatnot. Right? Yeah, cool. Got it. Cool. Um, So this is just a little preview. The rest of the stuff is mostly just like kind of stuff I already talked about. But Century Group Spacers Day of the Week for January 1st. And this is just like another like basic stuff, right? 1900 Monday, not leap year. 2100 Friday, not leap year, obviously. 2200 Wednesday, not leap year. Okay? This is just, I like to have that as just a base. Okay? So now here's a chart. Why is this all white? Here's a chart for the 5th and current century set with the first number representing the distance to the next alpha year. Positive number means distance from the previous alpha year for clarification, but only during century group transitions for the year 1900 to 2300. The century sets repeat itself every 400 years, so for any years before 1901 or any years after 2300, simply add or subtract any multiple of 400 until you get to one of these values, and you will find out exactly what that will be. So, for example, 1925, right, or 1927. The year 2327 will be a no Saturday, and I will also know that for the year 2327, if I add 10 years to 2337, it will be a no Friday. Got it? Yeah. So this is the whole list. I don't know again why it's white. I'm gonna make it like not. It's kind of weird. I don't know what happened there. Wait, what? Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. So here we are. I'll just kind of scroll through all of this. Oh, and it's bold here because this is a alpha year. So as you can see here, minus 27, and it just goes down, and that's telling you the distance until you get to the next alpha year. 1944 is an alpha year. 1972 is an alpha year, and this is obviously making its way to the year. Oh, I scrolled down somehow. This is obviously making its way to the year 2000, which is also obviously an alpha year and the Deimos proto year for this century set. 2028, yeah, nothing really interesting yet. But right here, 2084, this is when things get interesting. Because it says it's 27 years away from an alpha year, but as we know, the century group spacer is coming up. So 2085, that's 1 year after, right? So it's going to be the same as 1 year, 27 years before or 1 year after. That's why I have this +1 here for clarification. Basically to let you know that, hey, it's the same as a calendar that is 13 years away from an alpha year, but to let you know, this isn't actually 13 years away from an alpha year because of the century group spacer. So right here, 13 plus 15, right? But remember, we add 6. So instead of this being minus 12, it's minus 18. Then we add another 6. So instead of this being minus 17, and then, or sorry, instead of this being minus 17, you add 6, minus 23. So yeah, no Tuesday, no Wednesday, no Thursday, no Friday, no Saturday, no Sunday, no Monday, no yes Tuesday. And then we continue on to the cycle until we get to 2124, which is indeed an alpha year, as you can see by the fact that it is yes Saturday. And yeah, like I said, all of the alpha years are going to be yes Saturday, because that's the year that 2000 was. 2180, yes Saturday. And then we're getting close to the next century group spacer, which is the year 2199. So we're at minus 9. This would be minus 8, but whoops, it's the century group spacer. We have to add 6. 6 plus 8 is 14, so now we're at minus 14, also known as plus 14. But now we're the year after the Century Group Spacer, and we're moving on to the secondary Phobos Century Group. So we have to add another 6. So instead of this being 13, we have to add 6, and now it's 19. 18, 17, and then we just go down until we actually get to the Century Group, or to the Alpha year, which is the year 2220. That's the first Alpha year in the secondary Phobos Century Group. Until we get to 2248, and then 2280. Is that what it was? Nope, 2276. I was wrong. Was it 2180? Is that what it was? Was it 2180? I need to double check myself. Yeah, it was 2180, not 2280. Okay. Okay. Yeah, 2248, 2276, and as you can see here, we're getting up close to the end of the century set, which is 2300. So 2300 is a no Monday, and right here is basically where we start again. So the year 2301, no Tuesday, 2302, no Wednesday, 2303, no Thursday, and these are all 15 away. It's all the exact same as the very beginning. Sorry, I scrolled up way too high. Hold on. I scrolled up way too high. What was I thinking? Yep. 1901, no Tuesday, minus 15. 1902, minus 14, no Wednesday. 1903, minus 13, no Thursday. The cycle continues after 400 years. And I do this all the way up until the year 2316. So that way, you know, it doesn't just end at minus 15. I want it to actually get to 2316 at the very end there. So, there you go. That's all you need to know. You got all the information. 41 minutes and 51 seconds later, you now know every single calendar for every single year for the rest of time. Ain't that cool? As long as you remember this little chart up here. Where was that chart? This chart right here. I'm going to scroll out so you can have it all on the screen at the same time, since I don't think I ever did that. Man, this chart is big. Hold on. You're not going to be able to have the whole thing at once, but at the very least, I'll give you this, right? So this right here, and then take your little screenshot, and then right here, and then right here, I guess. There you go. If you memorize all of this, and you memorize all of the facts that I said previously, which obviously I do, but that's kind of unfair because I came up with the system. So I spent literally hours upon hours doing research for it. So of course it's ingrained into my brain. But, you know, you can always just look back at this document, right? Well, what day of the week is 2024 going to be on? What day of the week is Monday? What day of the week is January 1st going to be on for 2142? Let's find out. Boom, it's no Monday. There you go. When is the next reusable calendar? It's 2 years away. So that's plus 11 minus 11. So the plus 11 would be right here. Wait, what? No, that's no Monday. Sorry, I'm dumb. 2153 right here. Ain't that cool? And you can use this all to like theory check everything I said. And you can also look this up yourself if you really wanted to, but trust me, my system works. I just know it works because I came up with it and I spent a lot of time testing it. But anyways, yeah, that's it. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed my first video. I hope everything made sense. If not, well, just watch the video again. Probably. Yeah. I'm going to be making another video shortly about, I don't know what, maybe my Rainbow Six ideas? We'll see. It's going to be a long video, man. It's going to be long. It's going to be longer than this one. It's probably going to be like an hour and a half. But either way, take care. Peace. Bye. Also, subscribe to my other channels like Surge Media Gaming, Surge Media Gaming 2, and well, that's it, really. All those are the other ones. Yeah. Music channel. Clips channel. Yeah. Bye.